son builds $1 million invention, but his teacher fails him just to steal the idea for his own secret company. That's exactly what happened to my boy Alex. The professor thought he was untouchable, but he forgot one thing. I'm the biggest donor this university has ever seen. When they refused to fix his grade, I didn't just walk away. I cut off every cent of their funding and started a war that's currently tearing the school apart. From secret bank accounts to a boardroom showdown that left the dean shaking in his boots, I'm taking everything they have. Before we continue, make sure to hit the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from in the comments. My name is Mike, and for 30 years, I've run a construction company that handles everything from high-rise foundations to government bridges. I know what it's like to work until your hands bleed and your back feels like it's going to snap in half. I made a lot of money, but I never forgot where I came from. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I was born with a shovel in my hand. My son, Alex, was the only thing I had left after his mother, Sarah, passed away when he was 12. Her death left a hole in our lives that no amount of concrete or steel could ever fill, but it also forged a bond between Alex and me that was unbreakable. Sarah always told me that Alex had magic in his hands. While other kids were out playing sports or getting into trouble, Alex was in the garage with me. By the time he was 7, he could identify every tool in my chest. By 9, he was helping me fix the hydraulic lines on my backhoes. One Christmas, when he was just 8 years old, he found an old, broken radio in a scrap pile behind a neighbor's house. I watched him sit on the garage floor for 3 straight days, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't ask for help. He just sat there with a soldering iron and a magnifying glass. On the 4th day, that radio wasn't just playing music. He had rigged it with sensors so that it would roll across the floor, following the light of my flashlight like a loyal dog. He looked up at me with those big, proud eyes and said, "Dad, I made it better." That was the moment I knew my son was a genius, and I promised myself I would do whatever it took to make sure his genius was never wasted by a world that usually ignores kids from our side of the tracks. I worked double shifts for years, taking on dangerous bridge contracts and working in sub-zero temperatures just to build a college fund that would open any door he wanted. When the acceptance letter from Elite University arrived, we didn't just celebrate, we cried. It felt like we had finally won. I paid for his entire education up front, tuition, housing, every lab fee they could invent. And because I wanted him to have the best equipment, I became the university's largest private donor. I gave them $15 million to build the Miller Robotics wing. I thought I was buying him a future, but I was actually feeding a den of thieves. By his senior year, Alex was the star of the engineering department. He was working on a project he called the Ghost Logistician. It wasn't just a drone, it was a revolution. He had developed a swarm intelligence system where hundreds of drones could communicate instantly to manage a massive warehouse without a single human involved. He explained it to me over dinner one night, his eyes glowing with excitement. "Dad, imagine a warehouse that never sleeps, never makes a mistake, and knows exactly where every item is at every microsecond. It cuts energy costs by 60% and delivery times by half." I didn't understand all the coding talk, but I understood the impact. This was a billion-dollar idea. Alex lived in that lab. I would visit him and find him asleep at his desk, surrounded by empty coffee cups and sketches of circuit boards. He was obsessed. He told me his lead professor, Harlan Thorpe, was being incredibly helpful. Thorpe was a man who looked like he'd never had dirt under his fingernails in his life. He wore 3-piece suits to a robotics lab and spoke with a polished, condescending tone. Alex thought Thorpe was a mentor. He told me Thorpe was in the lab late every night, asking for copies of the raw source code so he could review the logic. I felt a twinge of worry in my gut. Something about Thorpe felt too slick, but I brushed it off. I told myself I was just being a protective, uneducated dad who didn't understand how high-level academia worked. The final presentation was a masterpiece. I sat in the back of the auditorium as Alex launched his ghost swarm. 50 drones rose into the air in perfect synchronization, moving crates around a mock floor with the grace of a ballet. The industry judges were speechless. I saw Thorpe standing in the shadows, his arms crossed, a strange smirk on his face. When it was over, Alex was mobbed by recruiters. He called me that night, crying with joy. "We did it, Dad. I'm going to be able to take care of you now." Then came the silence. Usually, grades were posted within 48 hours. 3 days passed, then 5, then a week. Alex's calls went from excited to anxious to terrified. He told me Thorpe wasn't answering his emails. On the 8th day, the portal finally updated. I was at a construction site, checking the pour on a new foundation, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Alex. No words, just a screenshot. The grade was a 55%, a fail. Below the grade was a comment that felt like a slap in the face. Students' work lacks fundamental originality. The core algorithms appear to be derivative of existing open-source logistics software. Project fails to meet the threshold for graduation or patent endorsement by the university. I didn't even wait to finish the inspection. I jumped in my truck and drove 3 hours to the campus, breaking every speed limit on the way. When I burst into Alex's dorm room, the lights were off. He was sitting on the floor in the dark, his drones smashed in a corner. He looked up at me, and his face was unrecognizable. He looked hollow. He told the board I'm a thief, Dad. He said I just copied code from the internet. He told them I'm not who they thought I was. The rage that boiled up inside me wasn't like anything I'd felt before. This wasn't a business dispute. This was a man trying to kill my son's soul. I told Alex to get in the truck. We weren't going home. We were going to the administration building. I didn't wait for the secretary to announce me. I kicked open Thorpe's office door. He was sitting there, calm as a lake, holding a leather-bound journal. He didn't even look surprised. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice dripping with fake pity. "I understand this is difficult, but academic integrity is the pillar of this institution. Your son simply isn't the genius you thought he was. He's a hard worker, sure, but he took a shortcut. He's lucky we aren't pursuing legal action for academic fraud." I leaned over his mahogany desk, my shadow covering him. "You're lying through your teeth, Thorpe. I saw him build every line of that code in my garage. I paid for his parts. I watched him fail 1,000 times before he got it right. You're trying to bury him." "What?" Thorpe leaned back and adjusted his tie. "As a man of manual labor, I don't expect you to grasp the complexities of intellectual property. The decision is final. Alex will not graduate this semester, and his research has been seized by the university for further investigation. Now, please leave, or I'll have campus security remove me." I didn't leave. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I didn't get this rich by being stupid, Harlan. I got rich by knowing how things are built, and I can tell when a foundation is rotten. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I took Alex to a hotel and told him to stay put. I called my chief of security, a man named Henderson who used to do forensic accounting for the feds. I told him I wanted everything on Thorpe. I wanted his bank accounts, his phone logs, his lunch orders. I want to know who he talked to when the lights were out. By 2 a.m., Henderson called me back. "Mike, you were right. This guy isn't just a teacher. He's the CEO of a shell company called Nexus Logistics Solutions, registered in the Cayman Islands. And guess what? They just signed a preliminary contract with a global shipping giant for a revolutionary autonomous warehouse system. The deal is worth $60 million. The blood drained from my face. Thorpe hadn't just failed Alex to be mean. He had failed him so he could legally seize the research as university property, and then, through a series of backdoor deals, license that research to his own private company. He was stealing my son's billion-dollar future to buy himself a private island. But Thorpe forgot one thing. He thought I was just a construction guy. He forgot that I owned the very ground his office is built on. I sat in that hotel room and made 3 phone calls. The next morning was the university's annual elite gala. It was a black-tie event where the richest donors gathered to celebrate themselves. The dean was there, the board of trustees was there, and Thorpe was there, looking like the cat that ate the canary. I didn't wear a tuxedo. I walked in wearing my work jeans and a high-vis jacket. The room went silent. The dean rushed over, looking embarrassed. "Mike, this is a private event. We can discuss your son's situation on Monday." I ignored him and walked straight to the stage, grabbing the microphone from the shocked speaker. I looked at the crowd, the people who thought they were the masters of the world. "My name is Mike Miller," I barked. "For 5 years, I've been the guy who keeps the lights on in this place. I built the Miller Robotics Wing. I paid for the new library. I've given this school $50 million because I believed in the future." I pointed a finger straight at Thorpe, who was trying to slip toward the exit. But today, I found out this school is nothing but a front for a thief. That man stole my son's life's work. He failed him so he could sell it to a shipping company for $60 million. And I have the bank records and the shell company filings to prove it. The room erupted into whispers. The dean tried to grab the mic, but I pushed him back. "Since the university wants to stand behind a thief," I shouted, "I'm making a change. As of 5 minutes ago, I've pulled every cent of my funding. The Miller Robotics Wing, I'm calling in a debt. The library, construction stops today. And since I own the land the north parking structures are built on through my holding company, I'm putting up a fence at midnight. No one gets in, and no one gets out." I leaned into the mic one last time, looking at Thorpe's pale, terrified face. "You thought my son reached his ceiling? Well, I'm the floor, Harlan, and I just fell out from under you." I dropped the mic and walked out. The war hadn't just started. I had just dropped the first bomb. But as I walked to my truck, Henderson messaged me, "Mike, we have a problem. Thorpe isn't acting alone. The dean's signature is on the shell company papers, too. They're coming for Alex's patents tonight." I realized then that a public shout wasn't enough. These people were desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. I had to protect my son, and I had to do it by taking the fight into their world. The morning after the gala, the university campus looked like a war zone. I didn't wait for a phone call or an apology. I moved before the sun was even up. By 6 a.m., my foreman, Big Sal, had 40 of our heaviest excavators and dump trucks lined up bumper to bumper, encircling the administration building. We weren't touching their precious ivy, but we had effectively turned the dean's office into a cage. I sat in my truck, sipping black coffee, watching the campus security guards look at my steelworkers with pure terror in their eyes. They knew my guys didn't take orders from anyone but me. When the dean finally arrived, he had to park 3 blocks away and walk. He was sweating through his expensive wool suit, his face a shade of purple I'd only seen on ripe plums. He pounded on my window, screaming about legal ramifications and academic freedom. I rolled the window down just an inch and told him, "The machines stay until my son's name is cleared. Every hour they sit here, it's costing me 50 grand, and I've got enough in the bank to keep them here until the next century. Can you say the same for your endowment fund?" He went pale when he realized I wasn't just angry. I was calculated. He ran inside to call his lawyers, but I knew Henderson was already 3 steps ahead of them. Henderson had spent the night in a dark room with 3 different hackers I'd hired from the private sector. By 10 a.m., He walked over to my truck with a tablet and a grin that told me we had found a kill shot. "Mike, Thorpe was sloppier than we thought," Henderson said, showing me a series of encrypted messages. He wasn't just selling the ghost logistician to one company. He was playing 4 different global shipping giants against each other. But here's the real kicker. The dean isn't just a bystander. He's got a 15% stake in Nexus Logistics, Thorpe's shell company. They were going to split the $60 million payout and retire to the Mediterranean by the end of the year. My blood turned to liquid nitrogen. They hadn't just stolen project. They were using my son's brain as their golden parachute. I told Henderson to send the evidence to the local DA. But first, I wanted to play with my food. I had Alex meet me at our private warehouse. He looked exhausted, but seeing the trucks surrounding the school had given him a spark of life I hadn't seen in weeks. "Alex," I said, pointing to a server rack we'd set up, "Thorpe thinks you're a fraud because he couldn't replicate your core logic without your master key. He's currently at the lab trying to force crack your encryption so he can show a working demo to his buyers this afternoon. What happens if he tries to run the code without the key?" Alex's eyes lit up. "The whole system will cascade, Dad. It'll look like it's working for 10 minutes, and then the drones will target the nearest wireless signal, and, well, they'll effectively attack the hub." I smiled. "Good. Let him steal it." In fact, Henderson leaked the master key to one of Thorpe's assistants who we know is on the take. Make it look like a mistake. We spent the afternoon watching the hidden cameras Henderson had planted in the university lab. We watched Thorpe hunched over a monitor, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking as he found the leaked key. He looked like a man who had just found a winning lottery ticket in the trash. He immediately started a live stream for his offshore buyers, bragging about his proprietary breakthrough. He was so arrogant, he even invited the dean into the frame to celebrate their joint innovation. The demo started at 4 p.m. On the screen, we saw 20 high-end drones lifting off in the university's main atrium. Thorpe was narrating, calling it the Thorpe Dean Intelligence Swarm. For the first 5 minutes, it was perfect. The drones moved in a beautiful, synchronized dance. The buyers on the video call were already talking about wire transfers. But then, the 10-minute mark hit. Suddenly, the drones stopped. Their lights turned a deep, angry red. One by one, they turned away from the crates and locked onto the dean's laptop. The chaos was glorious. The drones swarmed the podium, knocking Thorpe's expensive tea onto his lap and shattering the glass tables. The elite professor was reduced to screaming and ducking under his desk, while his stolen Invention tore his office apart. The video call with the buyers stayed live the whole time, capturing every second of the fraud's humiliation. The CEO of the biggest shipping company in the world watched as Thorpe cried for help, finally shouting, "I don't know how to stop them. I didn't write the override code." I walked into the atrium right then, with Alex by my side. I was holding a small remote. With one click, Alex sent the kill command, and the drones dropped to the floor like stones. The silence that followed was deafening. Thorpe looked up from under his desk, his hair disheveled and his dignity in ruins. I looked at the camera still broadcasting to the billionaire buyers and said, "This is Mike Miller. The man you're looking at is a thief who couldn't code a microwave, let alone a logistics swarm. If you want to talk to the man who actually built this, he's standing right here. But the price just went up, and 100% of the profits are going to the Miller Foundation for fair education." The dean tried to stand up and reclaim some authority, but I threw the tablet with the shell company records at his feet. "The police are at the gates, Dean. And since I've pulled my funding, the university's legal defense fund is officially empty. You have 10 minutes to clear out your desk before my crew starts the renovations on this building." But Thorpe wasn't done. As the police sirens got louder, he grabbed a hard drive from the server and bolted out the back door toward the parking lot. He knew he was going to prison, but he was going to take the code with him to sell on the black market. I looked at Big Sal, who was standing by the door. Sal, he's headed for the north lot. Sal grinned and keyed his radio. Copy that, boss. Closing the trap now. Thorpe reached his Ferrari, but as he put the key in the ignition, he realized he was boxed in by 4 10-ton steamrollers. He was trapped, and there was nowhere to go. I walked up to his window and tapped on the glass with a heavy steel wrench. You told me I wouldn't understand the complexities of intellectual property, Harlan. But in my world, property is something you build with your own hands. And you? You haven't built a damn thing. The cops hauled him away in handcuffs, right in front of the local news cameras. The dean followed shortly after, being led out of his office in a suit that was now covered in drone oil and shame. But as I watched them go, Henderson walked up with a worried look. Mike, we got the thieves, but the university board is trying to play one last card. They're claiming that because Alex was a student, they still legally own the patent, and they're planning to sell it to a foreign government tomorrow morning to pay off their debts. We've won the battle, but the war for the patent is about to go to the highest court in the land. I looked at my son, who finally had his head held high. The move by the board of trustees was the ultimate act of desperation. They were staring at a $40 million hole in their budget and a PR nightmare that was trending globally. Instead of surrendering, they decided to hide behind the institutional work clause in the student handbook. They released a statement at midnight claiming that while Professor Thorpe's methods were unorthodox, the intellectual property created on their campus belonged to the institution. They were effectively holding Alex's future hostage to pay for their own corruption. I sat in my truck, watching the board members' luxury SUVs pull into the private garage for an emergency session. They thought they could outlast me in a courtroom. They thought my money would run out before their legal stalling tactics did. They were wrong. I didn't call my lawyers this time. I called the one man in the city who owed me a favor bigger than the university itself, the chairman of the Municipal Planning Commission. 20 years ago, I had saved his son's life on a job site, and I had never asked for a thing in return. Arthur, I said, I need you to look up the zoning permits for Elite University South Campus, specifically the land under the Board of Trustees headquarters. There was a long silence on the other end, followed by the sound of typing. Mike, he whispered, that land is technically leased from a private holding company that went belly up in the 80s. The city took it over, but it was never officially deeded to the school. It's sitting on a temporary use permit that expires every 6 months. I grinned. Buy it from me, Arthur. Use my private equity firm. I want the deed by 9 a.m. While the board was inside, drafting a plan to sell Alex's code to an overseas buyer, I was busy signing the papers that made me their landlord. By 10 a.m., I walked into the boardroom without knocking. The 12 board members, men and women in $5,000 outfits, looked at me with pure disdain. The chairman of the board, a guy named Sterling who had made his money in predatory lending, stood up. Mr. Miller, you are trespassing. We are in the middle of a private session to finalize the sale of university assets. If you don't leave, we will have you arrested. I walked to the head of the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. I threw a heavy manila folder onto the mahogany surface. Actually, Sterling, you're the one trespassing. I just bought the ground you're sitting on, and as your new landlord, I've decided that this building is structurally unsound. I've filed an emergency demolition order with the city. You have exactly 30 minutes to vacate the premises before my crew starts taking the roof off. The room went dead silent. Sterling's face turned a ghostly shade of gray. You can't do that. This is a university. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. This was a university. Now it's a crime scene. You try to sell my son's brain to to cover your own tracks. You protected Thorpe while he was stealing from kids who trusted him. So here's how this goes. You're going to sign a full release of all intellectual property rights back to Alex Miller. You're going to sign a document admitting that the university committed fraud. And then you are all going to resign, effective immediately. Sterling tried to bluster, saying they would fight in the Supreme Court, but I held up my phone. I'm live streaming this, Sterling. There are 3 million people watching you right now decide between doing the right thing or watching a wrecking ball swing through that window. What's it going to be? One by one, the board members looked at each other and realized the game was over. They couldn't fight a man who owned the ground beneath their feet and had the eyes of the world on them. Sterling was the last to sign. His hand was shaking so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. As soon as the ink was dry, Alex walked in. He didn't look like the broken kid from the dorm room anymore. He looked like the man his mother knew he would become. He took the signed patent release, looked Sterling in the eye, and said, "Thank you for the education. I learned exactly what kind of man I never want to be." We walked out of that building as the first of my cranes began to move into place. I didn't actually demolish the building. I turned it into the Sarah Miller Innovation Center, a free lab for any student with an idea and no money to protect it. Thorpe and the dean were sentenced to 15 years each for wire fraud and racketeering. The university was forced to restructure, and for the first time in a century, it was actually run by educators instead of accountants. Alex's ghost logistician became the industry standard, and he used the first $10 million he made to build a trade school next door to the university, so kids who liked to work with their hands would always have a place to go. I'm still in construction. I still wake up at 5 a.m. and get dirt under my fingernails. But now, when I drive past that campus, I don't see a den of thieves. I see a legacy. I see a place where a kid with magic hands can change the world without a predator trying to steal his light. Because at the end of the day, you can build the tallest tower in the world, but if the foundation isn't built on the truth, it's only a matter of time before a father with a wrench comes along to tear it down. If you enjoyed seeing the elite get dismantled by a father's love and a bit of heavy machinery, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of ultimate justice. We want to hear from you. Comment foundation below if you think the board got what they deserved. We're picking one person from the comments to win a limited edition Magic Hands tech kit. So get those comments in now. Where should we take the fight next?